few weeks ago, you had a Joint Committee on Administrative Rules hearing that looked at the Department of Children and Family Services and the Illinois EPA and emergency rules that they had put out to essentially regulate their industries, and some questions about the governor's administration using emergency rule without talking to all of the different stakeholders involved in these industries. Welcome back, Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. So that was last month, and if you recall, when it comes to the Department of Children and Family Services, you have the question of the regulations put in place to essentially say, hey, you can't have certain people monitor rooms of children under the age of 2 for more than 90 minutes at the beginning of the day and 90 minutes at the end of the day. But during COVID, they essentially said, no, that can be for 3 hours at the beginning of the day and 3 hours at the end of the day, allowing for people that didn't meet certain qualifications to do that. But then after COVID was lifted, DCFS put in emergency rules that dropped it back down to that 90-minute mark. DCFS saying that they've had hundreds of complaints, and hundreds were founded, that people were violating this rule. And you had members of that bipartisan Joint Committee on Administrative Rules pushing back, saying that DCFS did not talk to the stakeholders, those who are running daycare operations. Daycare operations saying that they need to have the ability for these individuals to watch rooms of 2-year-olds and younger because of staffing constraints. And by not allowing that, you're limiting how much you can have as far as capacity for the state's child care industry to operate. And it could lead to increasing child care deserts in the state of Illinois. So a lot of pushback. And actually last month, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, they actually suspended the Department of Children and Family Services rule that says you can't have these individuals watching rooms of people under the age of 2. So what's the update from the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules? I talked with Don DeWitt, who's one of the Republicans on the panel, and he shared with me an update as to DCFS and whether or not they complied with the rule-making process or if they just didn't show up at all. Here's State Senator Don DeWitt talking a bit about that yesterday.
There was no resolution regarding that issue yesterday. There was no participation by DCFS at yesterday's JCAR meeting. There has been, to the best of our knowledge, no engagement between DCFS and the industry. We were very disappointed that they are not working towards resolution, and their current rules that they have proposed remain suspended.
So those rules remain suspended because, well, quite frankly, they did not head back to to JCAR to actually deal with the JCAR objections to lack of oversight and not talking with the industry. But another story about DCFS outside of JCAR, this is fascinating. You had a former Department of Children and Family Services employee and about 14 others. They've been indicted on federal charges for allegedly participating in a scheme to fraudulently obtain $3.2 million in state funds intended for child care services. Prosecutors said that Chantel Prigion orchestrated the fraud scheme from 2016 to 2022 while serving as a community social service planner for DCFS in Chicago. She fraudulently entered the information on several of her co-defendants into the agency's computer system and approved them to be paid as providers caring for foster children. So obviously, that's no good for DCFS. But back to JCAR, you've got not just the DCFS issue that was being focused on. You had another issue with the EPA and rules for clean air that they had not implemented. And even though they knew that they had to have certain rules in place or face the possible loss of federal funds, the Illinois EPA slow-walked getting those rules in place. And again, the complaint was that they didn't talk to the industries that would be affected by this, like, energy producers, refineries, and the like. So what ultimately happened there? Because last month, JCAR, they heard from Illinois EPA that there could be a substantial loss of federal tax funds if they don't get their rules in place. Well, Don DeWitt giving us that update yesterday about EPA's rulemaking process, and he says that has been resolved.
Yeah, the FOID card commission submitted.
Let's go to the EPA rules here. Apologize about that. We'll talk about the FOID card commission here in a moment. But the EPA rules, here's Don DeWitt giving us that update on how they brushed things up and got it all together.
EPA issues have been resolved. Any threat of losing federal transportation dollars has been resolved. Pollution Control Board will be filing rules regarding new emission controls issues in the very near future.
So, again, EPA complying with JCAR's requests, getting that all together, while DCFS did not. But something else that was on JCAR's agenda dealt with the Illinois State Police FOID Appeals Board. And this is new in a law that passed about a year ago or so that changed some of the aspects of the firearm owner identification law. And that's the FOID card ID that is essentially what's required for Illinoisans if they want to purchase or own firearms or ammunition in the state of Illinois. But if somebody was denied, there wasn't really a process in place to allow for an appeal of that denial. Well, a new FOID card law allows for that board to be created by Illinois State Police, and DeWitt, he shares that indeed those rules were put forward and things look good on that end, getting it all together for the Illinois State Police to conduct business with this FOID card appeals board.
Yeah, the FOID card commission submitted rules that were accepted. There were no objections filed with the rules presented. State Police is happy with what's been promulgated by that commission, and they will move forward on that basis.
So there you go. The latest out of JCAR. Glad I was able to talk with one of the members from that bipartisan panel because there was still a lot of unresolved issues from the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. And we'll see what happens with the Department of Children and Family Services moving forward.